This video is intended to provide you a little bit of help with the Chapter 5 Exercise 10. Now this exercise is the one that has you print coupons to pay the rent for the apartments. And the scenario is that there are 20 buildings, and each building has 15 units, and you want to print 12 monthly payments, coupons, for each building. We also know that the monthly payment is $800 and that each coupon should contain the building number, the apartment number, and the payment number, and of course also the $800 amount on each coupon. In order to do this, you're going to need to have some loops. 3 of them, obviously. A loop that iterates 12 times to print each coupon per unit. Another loop that iterates 15 times, once for each building, for each unit in the building. And then the third loop will iterate 20 times, once for each building. Now in order for this to work, you're going to have some sort of nesting. If you did this without modules, you would have basically a triple nested loop. Something like this. You would start your loop for 20 buildings. Of course, that loop would iterate 20 times. Inside that loop, you would have a loop for 15 apartments, and that loop would iterate 15 times. Inside the apartment loops, you would have a loop for printing the coupons, and of course that loop would iterate 12 times. Now remember that you have to end each loop in kind of the reverse sequence that you started on. So once you're finished printing the coupons, doing whatever you're supposed to do in the body of the loop, then you're going to end the loop for the coupons. When you're finished doing whatever you need to do in the loop for the 15 apartments, you end that loop, and then of course you end the loop for the 20 buildings. This program is going to need some variables and possibly some constants. At the very least, you should have a variable that keeps track of the building number. That variable would start at a value of 1 and increment up to 20. A variable to hold the number of apartments, again you would want that to be a number variable type that would increment from 1 to 15. And the payment coupon variable, that could be payment coupon or month, that is a number, again, that would increment from 1 to 12. Possible constants. The rent. We know the rent is $800. So you might want to create a constant or define a constant and set its value to 800. Other possible constants, you're going to have a maximum number of buildings, apartments, and payments. You might want to have a constant that holds those values. You might want to have a constant or constants that hold the data that's going to be printed on the coupons. The data other than the building number, apartment number, payment number, or month number. Those will be printed on the coupon, but they'll be printed based on the value in the variable through each iteration of the loop. We're going to start with the very inside loop. I'm going to back up a screen. I'm going to back up 2 screens. I'm going to talk about the loops briefly, but I'm going to start with the very inside loop, the coupon loop. The purpose of the coupon loop is to print the coupon. You may have more than one print statement here. You might have a header that says this is the payment coupon for Mr. Roper's apartment. You'll have print statements that print the building number, the apartment number, and the monthly payment number. Now that could be one print statement with multiple string constants or string literals and variables. Of course you're going to iterate this loop 12 times because you want 12 payment coupons. The next loop, the apartment loop. I forgot to mention here, you need to increment you're going to increment the coupon counter variable inside the body of the loop. So before this loop starts, you're going to set the coupon counter variable to 1, and then you print your coupons lines, whether it's one line or multiple lines. Then you increment the coupon counter variable. Remember that all loops, you've got to increment that sentinel value inside the body of the loop. The sentinel value is set before you get to the loop, and then it's incremented inside the loop, otherwise you have an infinite loop. To the apartment loop. And remember, that is actually the middle loop, or the second loop. Now the first thing you want to do is, in here, is set that coupon counter variable. Again, we're going to set the coupon counter variable. I mentioned that in the previous line. We don't set the coupon counter variable in the body of the coupon loop. We set that before we get into the coupon loop. So as part of the apartment loop, you're going to set the coupon counter variable to 1, and then you're going to do the coupon loop. After you're done doing the coupon loop, increment the apartment counter variable. Again, that apartment counter variable was initialized or set to 1 before we get to the apartment loop. We'll see that in the next slide. And then, of course, you're going to iterate this loop 15 times because we had 15 apartments. The very first loop, the building loop. And notice one of the first things you do is set the apartment counter variable. That's that sentinel value for the apartment loop. And then we do the apartment loop. When we're done doing the apartment loop, make sure you increment the building counter variable because we want to step through the loops again. And of course, we'll do the building loop 20 times. If you look in your book on page 204, this is not an example of the exercise we're talking about, but I want to point you to this flowchart reference because if you do your Chapter 5, Exercise 10, if you do the flowchart, you're going to want to have loops inside of loops. Now this one actually uses modules. This one references in the main program. Of course, define your variables, do the housekeeping, which is in your Exercise 10 might be printing the header or initializing the header of the coupon, but it's going to be setting that counter variable for the building loop. So it basically initializes the sentinel value for the building loop. And then you go into the building loop. So this would be the example of the building loop if you did Exercise 10 in modules. And then the building loop would call the apartment loop. If this were representing the apartment loop, then the apartment loop would call the coupon loop. Coupon loop would iterate 12 times, then it would come back to the apartment loop, then the apartment loop would iterate, maybe I said that wrong, the coupon loop would iterate 12 times, the apartment loop would iterate 15 times. Again, it's 12 times for each apartment, and each apartment would iterate 15 times for each building. This is not an example of Exercise 10 flowchart, but this is an example of nesting loops, or in this case, calling the loops using modules. Page 205 is an example of pseudocode. If you're going to do your exercise in pseudocode, you might want to reference this. In your main program, you do a loop. See, this is a while loop. This might represent your building loop. And then the detail loop, which is another loop, it would represent your apartment loop. And then inside this loop of exercise 10, you're going to have your coupon loop. So pages 204 and 205 referencing looping or nested looping. And we don't necessarily, it doesn't look like nested looping here, except that if you realize this is a loop, this is a while loop, and inside the while loop is nested a detail loop. And in your exercise 10, inside that apartment loop, you're going to print the coupon loop. Again, these are just references, not examples of the actual exercise. So make sure that your pseudocode or your flowchart is not exactly like these, but it's going to be similar.